Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Athlete Branding Podcast, episode 5. It's been a little while since I've created any content for YouTube or Instagram, but I'm finally back. More content for some athletes, talking about how athletes can build their social media, give more to their audience, engage with their audience, and most importantly, monetize and build your career inside and outside of your sport. Today, I'm joined by Ashwyn Lall, the creator of Ash's Sport Talk. Lots of great content on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. I'll leave all of his links in the description below. He covers all the news and conversations within sports, business, and marketing, giving you the information and insights that you need for your successful business and marketing strategies within sports. So thank you very much for doing this, mate. It's been a little while since I followed your content, and likewise. So it's nice to be able to have a chat. First thing I wanted to touch upon is talking about Twitch and what your thoughts on Twitch are, and the opportunities it presents for athletes and brands and even clubs and leagues on that platform.
Yeah, perfect stuff, mate. Listen, thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's great to share my insights on your platform, and superb to see the work you're doing with Signature Sports Marketing. Yeah, my thoughts on Twitch is it's a very, I think it's a very early adopting platform. I think there's still like certain areas like it needs to consider when building a community for athletes. But I mean, you've labeled like the key points there very well, mate. You know, there's definitely a lot of combat sports fighters on the platform, such as Demetrius Johnson, Quentin Jackson, Max Holloway, Jens Pulver, and I'm also aware Megan Anderson, former UFC fighters, on there as well. Yeah. It's a really superb opportunity for them to engage with their audience very easily through like the live chat functions that they have. You know, the fact that, you know, Generation Z and younger audiences are so enticed by personalized content, and just having somebody react to a comment they make is going to make a massive difference to their whole experience on Twitch. Plus, it's a chance where they can, where the actual streamers themselves, so the athletes, they can potentially collaborate with other athletes when playing games. So they're almost merging two sub-audiences together in that respect. And another really interesting point is there's also quite a lot of sports pundits that are on the platform, such as True Geordie, who obviously reacts to and does live commentary about football games and combat sports fights with a lot of other peers. So it could be a chance to for athletes to connect with those pundits. And what's really great with those pundits, George, is that they have a very wide reach around younger audiences. Like content creators have Generation Z, millennials, Gen Alpha literally in the palm of their hands. So it's a great chance for athletes to really capitalize on that opportunity through all the authentic relationships they may have. And the next point is, you know, it's very easy to produce. We all know athletes are very tight for time, from doing media interviews, from training, following nutrition plans. And the fact is they can literally stream their content, upload it, and then Bob's your uncle. And there's also great opportunities to monetize with partners. So I'm aware that more brands are like introducing in-game advertising. I'm aware Fortnite did this with MasterCard. Like when you're playing in Fortnite, if you're doing a certain map or in a certain arena, you'll have like a MasterCard logo or a MasterCard flag pop up during your gameplay, rather than having to sit through like a 5-second ad of a certain brand. So that's another great opportunity to boost revenue generation. Yeah, so those are the key points there. I'm certainly aware it presents a lot of long-term opportunities for esports as well. But I'm very keen to hear what your thoughts are on what I've just said too.
Yeah, you've raised 4 or 5 good points there. So this is the thing with my podcast is, I don't know if you ever see much or how much you've seen of it, but someone will make a point and then I'll go and talk for 10 minutes because I said I want to talk about Twitch, but you made 4 or 5 points that lead me on to kind of other areas. So firstly, yeah, the live chat I think is just such a secret weapon with Twitch. It's so easy just to talk to people. You don't even have to type back. It doesn't really take time. You can just do it as you're playing the game and just have these like natural conversations, just like doing an Instagram live or a live stream on TikTok. And this is something I say to every single athlete I talk to is, when I say be authentic, first thing is talk to your fans. If they're going to come to your Instagram and comment, or they're going to come to your Twitch and talk to you or whatever, it's so powerful for so many of these younger fans just to have a comment back, because they're going to no doubt screenshot that and then send that to all their friends, or put it on their Instagram story or things like that. So it puts your name out there even more. And for me, I think it actually drives more engagement, because people then will know that, oh, hey, this athlete replies to all his comments, so I'm going to comment because then I want him to reply to me, and then so on. So all your posts on Instagram, for example, then get shot out to all these people because they're engaging more. So there's so many repercussions to that which you can benefit from. But first and foremost, community. And second point you made was excellent, which you made a good point, which I actually hadn't really considered before I sat down today, is the pundits and these personalities on Twitch, like the True Geordie, for example. It's very easy for him to bring athletes or whoever who might be willing to go onto his show or onto his podcast, for that matter, to again get some reach and tell their story. Paddy Pimblett, who's just been signed by the UFC, I think he's appeared on the knockout with True Geordie a few times, watching boxing matches and MMA fights and whatever. And it was something that I think more footballers should do as well. But we're not really here to talk too much about football, but nevertheless, it's very easy for these athletes to give up an hour or 2 hours of their time and engage with their audience. And I think one thing that you perhaps didn't touch on was, with Twitch, there's no planning involved. These athletes might sit down and just want to play Call of Duty or play FIFA or play UFC or whatever, and they don't have to plan, what content do I want to do? Who's going to film it? Who's going to edit it? They can just sit down, they've got the equipment, whack the camera on themselves, and then just talk and interact with the chat. And then, integrate other athletes into it, because that will create more conversations and bring more audience and more reach. And something I've noticed with MMA fighters on Twitch in particular is they have these little kind of like memeable moments where something funny will happen in the game, or like some silly glitch or something, and then they can upload that to their Instagram and onto their TikTok and onto their Twitch. And then people like that because they're like, hey, this is one of my favorite athletes who might fight in the UFC just being silly playing Fortnite or playing Call of Duty, and here's just a little funny thing that happened, and people retweet it, and then people see that this athlete is down to earth. And it's something that's so easy to do, as long as you have an editor just to cut those little clips out and then throw them out there, and it creates more conversations. And on to another point that you made, it is obviously very popular amongst MMA fighters. Obviously, the pay in MMA isn't always great, and this is something that has been picked up on by a lot of fighters. I think Sean O'Malley is probably the best paid. He's monetized from Twitch the best. I think when he had his drug suspension, probably 2 or 3 years ago now, he said he was making 50 grand a year from Twitch on its own. I mean, that's more than probably what he was getting per fight. So if you're out for a year or 2 years with a drug suspension, then that's 50 grand you've got in your pocket right there. And the reason for that, I think, is there's so much you can do with it in terms of subscriptions. I know that there's super chats and things like that with live streaming, but it's so easy for those organic, authentic brand partnerships and product placement. I know you mentioned MasterCard on Fortnite. Fortnite is something that it's taps into culture and Gen Z so well. It understands that generation so well. Even with football teams, you can get your character to wear, like, I think, a Wolverhampton Wanderers kit and I think an AC Milan kit. And there's just all these kinds of like embedded adverts and embedded marketing into it, but it's so seamless and actually provides more value to the user, because they want to have that logo on their character, or they see that logo in the arena that they're fighting in, or whatever. So it's much more organic and natural for the consumer who you want to speak to, rather than saying, here, stop your game or stop this piece of content you're watching, and then let's listen to our advert. And I was watching the front office sports marketing essentials course. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a great course for students and things like that who might be watching this to go and learn a bit more about sports marketing. I think it was the Genesco vice president who, the marketing agency of Pepsi, said, in fact, it wasn't. It was the head of esports at Pepsi, and this is another important point I want to talk about, that a soft drinks brand now has a head of esports. If that doesn't tell you what kind of time that we're living in marketing, then I don't know what else does. And what a lesson that is, just for anyone who wants to learn about marketing, that a soft drinks brand now has a head of esports. But other than gaming equipment and headphones, soft drinks are the second biggest sponsor of esports, because all these esports athletes have ready-made communities on Twitch because they're streaming themselves 10 hours a day playing. So it's very easy for these brands to reach these built-in communities, even when the athlete isn't actually competing. And that's something that I think MMA athletes, or any athlete who's interested in gaming, can tap into. I mean, it's so organic and so natural for headphones and music and hardware and soft drinks, for example, to insert themselves into these communities. Because if you're a gamer and you're going to play games until 3 a.m. in the morning, then you're going to align yourself, or you're going to consume energy drinks at midnight to keep you going through that hard gaming session, right? So those are the people who Pepsi, for example, would want to speak to. And if you're an MMA fighter on Twitch, then yeah, you might get some of those deals with those brands. You might want to work with you to reach your audience. So that, for me, I think is the biggest lesson, what I said about the soft drinks brand having a head of esports. It's just so seamless within esports. And if you're an MMA fighter, you can just by streaming yourself a couple hours each week playing on Twitch, you can almost effortlessly kind of carve a future in esports if that's what would interest you, right? Whether it's commentating or once you retire, you become a professional player. It's really quite an opportunity just for playing games on live with your built-in community that you have from when you fight, or from what you're doing elsewhere with YouTube or Twitter or Instagram, for example. And that is really the biggest lesson that I keep drumming into these athletes, is it can be really simple as that. I think a big issue that I have when I speak to these fighters is they want like a clear, definitive answer as to what they should do and how much they should post and what they should post. And they think that they need to bring in all these cameramen and all these video editors and sound people to produce something really slick, like you might see on Amazon Prime. But really, it's not. That's great, but it's not always that you need to do. If you can engage and create content easily, then you're going to win, because you can then connect those brands with those people. So yeah, for athletes watching this, Twitch is the way to go. If you're into gaming, even Megan Anderson just does watch parties reacting to fights on her Twitch. It's easy content. She's just watching fights and she just puts a camera on herself, and that's content made where you can engage easily. It doesn't take any more time than what you're going to do anyway. So Twitch, huge opportunity. Obviously, it's a company owned by Amazon, so much potential for innovation. Amazon's obviously one of the biggest tech companies in the world. It's only going to innovate. So if you can align yourself with Twitch and get close to Twitch, then it's going to look after you if you are active on there. So yeah, some great points on Twitch, and that leads us really nicely on to this point about Gen Z that I wanted to talk about. They are, or the data and the insights are showing that they are becoming far less interested in sports on the whole. The one major exception really is esports, where Gen Z's interest in esports is so much more than previous generations. NBA has lots of good digital content outside of the sport, and I think that's one of the reasons why NBA is increasing in interest amongst our generation. Football/soccer for the Americans is another one, but I think that's actually still yet to mature in how it behaves digitally. And mixed martial arts. So those are the 4 sports that seem to be ahead of the game, or actually have some kind of foothold with Gen Z. So in your opinion, what can athletes, teams, leagues, clubs, whoever, do to engage these fans and capture these fans and make them long-time loyal customers?
It's a great point, George. I think the key part here is making sure that content is digestible. So with an athlete, they've got to make sure, as well as promoting what they do within their sport, they're also promoting like an outside focus towards that, such as what they get up to within the day of their life, or what their other passions are away from sport, such as Israel Adesanya has been very open about his passion for anime, his passion for culture, and doing stuff stuff like that. And he's made a lot more of an effort on his YouTube channel to just show more day in the lives of what he does, such as he recently uploaded a video about where he was going jet skiing somewhere in New Zealand. Another really great example is an upcoming boxer called Vidal Riley, who actually trained KSI for his fight in the rematch at the Staples Center. He's really started to make a big effort with his personal brand, where he has his own podcast with his good friend Leon Williams, who was KSI's strength and conditioning coach. He also does other videos with some of his friends around just pure entertainment. Ryan Garcia as well. He's a huge star at the moment from his boxing skills, and also he's got a huge following on social media, and he's put in the work to get to that, such as doing like fun challenges such as speed bag challenges, how many punches he can throw in like 1 minute, and body shot challenges too. These are just really simple things that you can just gain a lot of traction from. And he also collaborates with a lot of other creators, such as some TikTok stars, Addison Rae and Dixie D'Amelio, who are very big in America. He did some like sparring challenges with them. So thinking outside the box about how you can entice those generations. And also TikTok, if you're collaborating with TikTok stars that have the magnitude of someone like Addison Rae and Dixie D'Amelio, that is literally Gen Z within the palm of your hands. And I think just showcasing a lot more of yourself through potential long-form content in some ways, such as Jorge Masvidal, his full-time fighter series was a great opportunity for fans to see the side of him outside of the octagon, such as what it's like partying on a yacht, seeing what it's like behind the media days, his preparations ahead of fights, what his diet plans look like. And I think this is just a general demand, and there's a market for that type of stuff, and it's a chance for brands to also gain sponsorship opportunities from. And I think as well as athletes being a part of that picture, I think it welcomes brands to be more enticed to you, such as Foot Asylum are a really unique brand who are using their platform to, essentially they're a sportswear brand, but they're creating a lot of content which is just about pure entertainment, which naturally creates viral moments, big cultural clashes, and meme moments as well, which are, you know, huge parts of social media. And I think just being involved and associated with focusing your content around entertainment as well as like your actual athletic career is really key. So essentially, the way that athletes can help entice Generation Z is just by making their content more digestible through giving that insight into what their life is like outside of sport, alongside just being more personalized well. So also there's NFT burning a lot of, can give personalized messages to your fans, which could be a great opportunity to, again, like we were saying with Twitch, interacting with your audience through that. Potentially doing virtual meet and greets as well. I know that FanMio is a great platform for innovating within that space, and really just putting fan engagement in there. Of course, there's so many points to consider, but ultimately, if you nail those, you're on the right track.
Exactly. So I'll start with the point you made about Foot Asylum, because it's a nice simple point to sort of jump off of. It's that classic, in marketing today, you have to be a media company first, and okay, they are a retailer of sort of sportswear and things like that, but they've really kind of positioned themselves within culture amongst this sort of Gen Z in the UK, where they've got people like Chunks and Young Philly and KSI, in fact, appearing in this content, being funny, and then that ends up on all the meme pages, on people's Instagram stories, on Facebook, getting shared around, just with that Foot Asylum logo in there. So that's an opportunity potentially for athletes that maybe they go and appear on content on the channels of the brands rather than coming onto your platforms. And most importantly, what you said there, it has to be digestible. I've got a couple of statistics here, which were sourced in a study by Morning Consult. So 65% of 13 to 34-year-olds find stories about athletes more interesting than games or the fights themselves. So that really shows that in order to actually capture this sort of generation, you have to be giving them more. And it's actually something that I've noticed as I've got a bit older. Perhaps I don't pay so much attention to it, but when I was a teenager in particular, I watched all of the UFC embeddeds. I watched all of the content from my favorite fighters. I watched all the content from Liverpool FC. Like, there's only you know, a football club will play 1 or 2 matches week, one of your favorite fighters might only fight once a year, or not might fight at all for 2 years. So give them more content to consume, keep yourself relevant. And not only does it actually create opportunities to monetize yourself, but if you're in the UFC, for example, and you build this community and perhaps you capture a whole new audience from a different culture in a different country, perhaps, and bring them to you, and they perhaps might like your personality and they like seeing what it's like, what an MMA fighter eats in a day, or how they train in a day. And then perhaps they come to you, and then you actually bring them to the sport, and then you get paid more in the sport yourself because you're drawing people to the sport. And that's actually a luxury that I think MMA fighters or combat sports fighters have, that perhaps team sports players don't. There's so much more capacity for you to take ownership of your content and what you actually do. And I was speaking to someone who used to, on my previous episode, who used to work for BAMA and various promotions. And fighters would say to her all the time, why aren't you promoting me? Why aren't you doing more to promote me? I feel neglected. But they only have so much money to spend on media. They only have so much time and effort that they can put into media. So if you're not helping yourself, why should they help you? If you're building an audience yourself with content, whether it's just doing a few Instagram stories or going live on your Instagram and answering some questions, then you're so much more likely to succeed. And 75% of 13 to 34-year-olds like learning about the lives of athletes outside of the sport that they play. So again, it's just a simple daily vlog or weekly vlog, I think, is probably the easiest or most organic one that you can do. Just you can literally use your iPhone, just take the fans through your day, show them who you're training with. If you're at a new gym, go and vlog that. Do a little tour of the gym if you want, and put these into little 10-minute, 15-minute vlogs. And then again, you can extract that content, put that on your TikTok, put it on your Twitter, put it on your Instagram. And you then have to put in less effort because you can just subtract this little micro content. And there was one more point I was going to make, which I've now forgot, because like I say, I always have so much to say, I forget half of what I want to say on Gen Z. But yeah, it's this continuous trend of them wanting more outside of the sport. They're actually far less likely to watch a full game of sports, which again, if you're a fighter who is perhaps on the prelims, you're not perhaps not going to get as much attention or as much reach when these cards can last 4 to 5 hours per broadcast. If you're going to have these generations, these consumers rather, jumping in and out, watching the fights they want, being more selective. If you can engage them and give them more overall, then they're much more likely to have an affinity for you, to watch your fights, to engage with your social media. And then this luxury in mixed martial arts, I've made this point before, you're in a very unique position in combat sports where you can talk your way into more success. I mean, you can't have Mbappe and Haaland tweeting at each other and UEFA say, right, let's do a PSG Dortmund Champions League final. It doesn't work like that. But if you're a fighter who can build an audience for yourself and you can get attention, get people talking about you. I mean, Colby Covington's a good example. Obviously a great fighter as well, but perhaps some people felt that perhaps he was fast-tracked a little bit. And Conor McGregor, I think people feel like he was fast-tracked to lots of these big opportunities, which financially, yes, are beneficial, but career-wise, actually accelerate your career through becoming a media company of your own. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'll say it on every single podcast. It's just about providing value. There's so much that you can do. Like you said, those daily vlogs, for example, or doing little challenges and collaborating with other creators for that extra bit of reach and capturing these parts of the wider kind of generation. And aim to inspire. Ryan Garcia works at Gymshark. I've spoken to a couple of people at Gymshark, and they say, well, they want athletes who can inspire, who have a story. And I'm sure every athlete from every angle will have an interesting story in their own right, but you have to tell it and inspire people and engage people with it. And then these brands who can relate or think that their consumers could relate will then want to work with you and align with you, and you can go and appear in their content and vice versa. And that in itself actually builds the brand. I mean, if, for example, Gymshark or an Adidas are going to produce this content for you to go onto their social media channels, then you're going to reach a whole new wave of people again who might then come to the sport that you're competing in. even simple stuff like here's me hitting pads, here's how to throw a good 1-2, here's how to skip. I was looking at Anthony Yard's TikTok last week. The most engaged content he has isn't highlights, it isn't hype videos, it's not him trying to sell you something, it's him teaching a technique. Because with TikTok in particular, people love self-defense on TikTok for some reason. I guess because it's quite a female audience, perhaps. And people like it, and it gets shot out to more and more people who will then follow you. And even if they perhaps don't watch his fights, they still might want to consume his content on, oh, here's how I can box, or here's an MMA fighter showing some jiu-jitsu techniques. And then from there, you can monetize and produce your own premium series, which might go on, you could put on OnlyFans, which Israel Adesanya has done in a couple of the fighters, or you can just sell it yourself on your website or whatever, and people might pay 10, 20, 30 pounds to watch you teach these things in a more in-depth, advanced way. And it's just that it might take 2-3 minutes to record yourself and a teammate creating that little tutorial, but it could go so much further. And then you can even integrate brands into that as well if you wanted to. So that really is the way with Gen Z. You've just got to give them more. They're not interested in just sports. They're interested in consuming all of sports. They want to know what goes on behind closed doors. And it's actually at a point where that's more interesting. If you take, for example, Juventus on Netflix or Man City or Spurs on Amazon Prime, I support Liverpool. I don't care about Man City particularly. I don't really care about Juventus or Spurs, but I watched it and I really enjoyed it because this is what life is like behind a professional football club. And I think it's actually a real opportunity at the moment that your content doesn't even have to be that good. You just have to be one of the few people making content, and people will come to you anyway. I mean, again, I'm not a huge Jorge Masvidal fan, but I still watch bits of his content because it's still interesting to me. Not because I'm so much interested in him, but it's the overall, this is the lifestyle of an MMA fighter, perhaps. So if you start, then you'll start learning, and you give yourself this massive advantage, because in 10 years' time, every single athlete is going to be competing for all this attention. The supply of athlete content is this much, the demand for it is this much. So the reach you can get just by doing a little weekly vlog on your iPhone is absolutely huge, and you can mark yourself as a poster boy of the sport, and as so many people look to as one of the main attractions, just by putting your name out there, not just waiting for the UFC or One Championship or whoever to do it for you. And this, I guess, leads us very nicely on the topic of Gen Z, and also on the topic of the power of creating content. Leads us on to nicely Triller Fight Club. I know this is something that you've spoke to a huge amount. Obviously, it's quite controversial, polarizing in the sports world. Dana White said on the weekend, I think the quote, "I don't give a fuck" about Triller Fight Club, which is an interesting choice of words. So yeah, let's just talk about your thoughts on Triller Fight Club. Not necessarily whether you're for or against as a boxing fan or as a fight fan, but from a business perspective, do you think it makes sense?
I do. I think it does make sense. And I'm saying this from a perspective of myself being someone that was a late adopter into combat sport. For example, what Triller are doing is they're innovating. They're essentially creating a crossover with the likes of creators and that whole entertainment-led sport feel. I initially got into, the real time I got into boxing was, funnily enough, when Floyd Mayweather fought Conor McGregor back in 2017. And ever since then, I started to really follow AJ, paid attention to the heavyweight division, started paying attention to Khabib in the MMA world as well. And I think from a business perspective, it's great because it's bringing a new wave of culture to boxing. And as we know, boxing has been a sport which has really struggled to entice a young audience for a long time. But by what Triller are doing, such as going back to their Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. card, it was one of the highest pay-per-views of 2020. And apparently, Jake Paul fighting Nate Robinson was one of the most influential parts of what made that card so special. The fact that it was very memeable on social media. Jake Paul is one of the most polarizing characters within combat sport. So essentially, yes, it is a very polarizing topic and very controversial, but at the same time, it's drawing attention from an unprecedented audience and create some things from their most recent event, the Triller Fight Club, between Jake Paul and Ben Askren, which could have been improved. I think the whole production throughout the night was very catastrophic in some ways. I feel there was so many things going on, such as like there was like a slapping contest going on like before the actual fight began. There were like major personalities throughout the whole thing, with Snoop Dogg, the D'Amelio sisters, Pete Davidson, Oscar De La Hoya. There were so many major personalities involved, and I think Triller maybe potentially thought they might have bit off more than they could have chewed during that event. But I think ultimately the principle is there with regards to bringing that entertainment-led sport feel and really utilizing the power of influencers and bring that brand power from celebrities. But ultimately, I think you've got to try and find a streamlined way of channeling that rightly to make it a lot more professionalized, because ultimately it's all well and good having the entertainment feel, but ultimately as sports fans and even as entertainment fans, you want quality, you want professionalism, and I think that's something which Triller could potentially work on, and they'll get better at as they keep on doing it. So from a business perspective, I think it makes a lot of sense, but you've got to be careful on a few strings.
Yeah, there's a lot to say on Triller, and I think something that I don't think gets talked about enough is the potential long-term implications for combat sports and the UFC and boxing in general. I think that the intention from Triller is very clear. Sports, music, tech, gaming, entertainment, fashion, music, whatever, they're all coming together to build an industry of its own, and an entertainment industry of its own. And bringing in creators like Jake Paul means Triller can ride this wave of culture and reach those new fans. The concern for me is if this strategy gets perhaps abused a bit too often, does it then start to completely redefine and reposition what combat sports is and what fans want? I mean, for me, I've followed mixed martial arts for about 7 years. I'd consider myself a hardcore fan. I'd consume a lot of the content, a lot of fights. I'm a bit of a purist, perhaps you might say. And while I completely understand the Triller strategy here with bringing Jake Paul in, I also understand the UFC strategy when they had CM Punk come in and fight a few years back, or when they tried to book the Daniel Cormier versus Brock Lesnar fight. They want to reach these new fans and they want to sell tickets and sell pay-per-views, obviously. But something that the UFC has been labelled as in the last few years is it's becoming a circus. It's not a meritocracy. You don't have the best fighters fighting the best, and the money fights, or the circus fights, people might call them, are starting to take precedence over that. And I think in the long run, you could actually alienate hardcore fans from even paying attention to the sport or paying attention to the company. And what I don't want is for these Gen Z fans, this new wave of fans coming to boxing, thanks to KSI, thanks to Logan Paul, thanks to Jake Paul, to then always expect that from boxing, because it's a very different thing. It's boxing to entertain. It's not boxing to really find out who the best boxer in the world is, right? Which, if that's what you want to really consume a sport for, you want to find out who the best are. You want to see competition. And I think it kind of defeats sort of the point of building this sport and bringing new fans to the sport if they're just going to want to see the likes of Jake Paul and Logan Paul, and like Logan Paul fighting Floyd Mayweather. I don't even know what the point really is. I mean, again, from a business perspective, I guess it makes sense. If it makes money, then of course they're going to do it. I don't blame them. But in the long run, does this mean that the sport is going in a different direction? And I actually think, we've said boxing has a struggle to attract new fans. I think partly the model in which boxing and MMA works, with the pay-per-view model, I think is actually a bit outdated personally. Even the WWE has shifted strategy from that really, and they were the first ones really doing it. I feel like, as we said, this Gen Z demand for wanting more content outside of the sport, could that be offset? Could this Triller Fight Club not be necessary if the likes of the top MMA brands and the top boxing promotions build this content and they start to do more to engage these fans and build perhaps platforms of their own and social media platforms of their own to build these communities and let them engage and give Gen Z what they want without it going too far and just being entertainment for the sake of, hey, let's see Jake Paul fight Ben Askren, and I do think eventually the novelty will kind of wear off. I remember when Joe Weller first fought KSI, I kind of wanted to watch it just to see what it was like, just to see what actually happened, see what it's like. But you hear every 2 minutes now of, oh, Jake Paul calls out this guy, or Logan Paul's going to fight Floyd, or whoever. It's kind of like, I don't really care anymore because they've done it a few times. I'm a bit bored of it, and I think the way the hardcore fans are responding to it is really telling, because it seems that the casual fans seem to be this wider market, this kind of mass audience that you can reach, but you're going to alienate the hardcore fans, and ultimately I think this younger generation, this new generation, is probably going to get bored. I think the novelty will kind of wear off. But it is all, again, a lesson for athletes that they do need to become creators in some ranks. That's what this younger generation wants, and the content creators are now earning more than boxers. I mean, think KSI Logan Paul 2 was they were the main event, and I think Billy Joe Saunders fought on the undercard. And there's a lot of boxers, a lot of boxers realize, oh, this is the game now. These people have this huge audience. People want to pay to see them box, so they're going to get paid more. And there's these other fighters who are very traditional, thinking that's not fair. I'm a better boxer. But if you can capture these audiences in your own content and get them really truly falling in love with boxing, not just with the kind of ruckus that comes with Jake Paul's going to fight Askren because let's see what happens, then that actually is, I think, a bit more sustainable in the long term. And again, keep engaging them, keep monetizing them, and bring these brands in who can actually provide more value. There might be brands who can come into these events and really offer it something more. I think that's kind of what, like you said, what Triller struggled with. I think they just went a bit too far with it, and I think they had Snoop Dogg did the live performance, and there were all these kind of like different bits of entertainment which kind of took away from what it really was. And I think that's something that combat sports need to be incredibly wary of, because, like I said, I've seen it in the UFC of fighters who perhaps don't deserve a big fight or a title shot get one because that's what will appeal to a wider market. But ultimately, it defeats the point of why people really truly love the sport. And I think that's a real danger. It's a real danger of losing this vision and losing this identity and repositioning as something that the UFC or whoever don't really want to be. And I think that they need to be incredibly careful of that. And I think that they can offset the need to do that with creating content and being more engaging digitally outside of the sport, not just having these kind of freak show events. And in talking of repositioning, I think that leads us well onto the final thing I wanted to discuss, which is One Championship. Incredibly innovative. The digital and social media strategies look really good to me. They're posting lots of old highlights, lots of knockout, lots of showreel stuff. They engage with comments. They answer questions about the rule set in their Instagram comments, for example, which I really like. I think that's a very subtle kind of thing, but it's an easy way to engage people and teach them. And it is different to the UFC in a lot of ways. It doesn't just cover mixed martial arts. And again, it's starting to become a real media company of its own. And I think with the One Championship, The Apprentice, which has launched now in Asia, it's not over here yet, bringing in some top fighters to come and appear on that show. Do you think this could be a repositioning strategy for them to perhaps reach a new audience and position itself differently from the UFC as a premium brand, sophisticated brand for that sophisticated consumer?
There's certainly potential. There's certainly potential there for sure, and I think the Apprentice edition is a great initiative to establish itself as more of an entertainment entity. I think it helps it develop a lot more of an international presence, and it's essentially, in some ways, unlocking potentially a new audience. Whereas I think something that I'd really love to see is, as well as like the final product being around the athletes and seeing them compete, I'm also very interested in actually the people behind that production, such as the people working with the media, people working around the production side of it. And I think that's something which The Apprentice could potentially encapsulate. It gives the people of the awareness of some of the things that go on to make the final product happen. And I feel it's something that's really beneficial for athletes to learn as well. Upcoming athletes within combat sports can pay attention to the type of decision making they would need to be aware of, the types of activities that go on within creating a one championship production, how negotiations potentially work as well, to understand how to remain business savvy as well as physically as well. And one championship have some really fantastic talents. Over the weekend, they had a real groundbreaking moment with Arjun Singh Bhullar becoming the first Indian MMA world champion, and he's now mentioned he's really keen to go into WWE. And they brought over Eddie Alvarez from the UFC. Ben Askren was once there too, and I feel one championship, what's really great with this whole repositioning strategy is they're in Asia, and Asia has a highly impressionable audience, particularly in China. As I'm aware, they've established themselves on TikTok, Bilibili, Weibo, which are culturally sensitive platforms around China, where they can really encapsulate that Chinese audience through their content. And I feel Asia is a very close-knit community within itself, particularly around the Chinese region. So one championship have a very lucrative opportunity to gain a powerful audience and to really entice their brand over there. And that can help them expand overseas. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential to become a great entertainment entity to capture that new demographic. But I also suppose there could just be some things that they would need to consider to ensure that they don't dilute, like you were saying earlier with Triller, diluting the attention away from the pure love around MMA. That one championship don't potentially go down that same route, as I'm sure there's a lot of fans from one championship that love it from that competitive nature. So I think that, and essentially, that's something they've got to consider. But the initiative's great.
I agree, and I think that the most important thing here is the One Championship Apprentice is something that they're doing on top of being a fight promotion. With Triller, the what they're doing is that the actual product itself is directed towards this kind of teenage and younger sort of market. If you're a pure MMA fan and the One Championship Apprentice doesn't interest you, that's fine. You can just not watch it. With Triller, that's not really the case, because if you want to watch the fights, then you have to watch all the other stuff that comes with it, and it's just kind of, you don't really want to see that necessarily. I mentioned before we came on as well, One Championship used to be One Fight Championship. They got rid of the word fight because I guess the connotations of that people kind of might take the wrong way, and MMA is still a young sport, and it has this kind of this image in people's mind where they think it's some kind of blood sport for absolute savages, when it's obviously way more than that, right? So this new strategy of kind of repositioning and reaching these new audiences in terms of lifestyle and perhaps occupation or whatever, but also geographically. One Championship Apprentice is yet to come to the Western world, but it is shortly. I'm aware that the media deals will be different in all kinds of territories, but it's my understanding that this show isn't being put behind a paywall, which means it's very easy for people to just stumble across this program. Perhaps they don't know what One Championship is, but they are familiar with The Apprentice. They want to watch it, and it's kind of a spin-off of The Apprentice. It's a lot different, and again, capture that new audience, people who might not know much about fighting, but they get sucked into it via that way. I mean, it's a kind of similar strategy that you might see with gamification. I mean, I only got to know MMA because of the UFC games. So I wasn't reached directly about the UFC. I was reached by EA Sports reaching me and then putting me on to MMA. I think it might be very similar for people who want to watch this kind of crazy version of The Apprentice, and then it leads them down this path of learning more about mixed martial arts. And as you said as well, the social strategy around this and around One Championship in general, I think is incredibly solid. I don't know how active they are on Triller, to be quite honest, but I think if they want to reach the Indian market, then that's the way to go, because TikTok is banned in India. And this is what I've said to a couple One Championship athletes is, if you want to reach the Indian market, because that's, it's Asia, One Championship's big in Asia, then Triller is the way to go because of political reasons. TikTok's banned in India. And I think back in November, this is when it was banned in November last year, the use of Triller in India went from 1 million users to 30 million overnight because TikTok was banned, which really tells you about the kind of demand and what that generation wants is a platform like TikTok, like we said, easily digestible, short 1 minute content. You can scroll through it, it keeps you going for hours, and Triller is kind of that alternative. So if you want to reach people in India, I'm sure that number's far greater than 30 million, 6-7 months on. So creating Triller content and riding this wave that Triller has and this momentum that Triller has with the younger generation. I'm not saying you have to go and fight Jake Paul if you don't want to, but you can still capitalize on the momentum and the position of Triller to actually capture that young audience and then bring them to a sort of more matured state of a fan where they're more of a hardcore, more of a purist, and they like watching the fights and they want to see the best fighters fight the best. And there's always kind of some entertainment and some shenanigans around it at press conferences and things like that. And that's all fine, that's part of the sport. But for me, I think the long-term aim of these companies needs to be actually engaging fans with the true love of the sport, not just the personalities in it. I think telling the stories of the athletes is a great way to give further value. I'm not sure that that's a way to actually get them invested in the first place. Just saying, here's Jake Paul fighting on our show, or Jake Paul's not going to be around forever, right? But if you can get them interested in boxing and then they want to watch the best fighters, and then once they're slightly invested in those fighters, then give them that content, then tell their stories. And that's good for the athletes, it's good for the brands, and it means that Gen Z is satisfied, that they can be more engaged, they can partake in things like betting, more content, more engagement, interacting with other fans in that same community. They're gonna buy the companies that are sponsoring you because they want to feel engaged with you, and you have influence over these people. And that's really one more thing that we kind of could touch upon is Gen Z, how much power and weight they give to their sort of idols. As we said earlier, the power of just replying to someone's comment is huge for a lot of these kids and teens, and that's the kind of thing that they're going to remember forever. And it's what I would call creating a sort of a brand experience. I mean, if one of your favorite fighters invited you onto his Twitch to have a game of FIFA against him or play Call of Duty with him, you're going to remember that forever, and you're going to watch all of his fights and you're going to be fully invested. And the more you can give back to those fans and people see that you're down to earth, again, that's the way to engage them. That's the way to win in the long term. If you provide value and truly care about your audience, you can't go wrong. All the nuance with learning about creating content and distributing content, that's a learning curve anyway. But if you truly care about your fans, then sooner or later it's going to work out for you, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Were you about to make another point?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point, and also it's also a really good chance to understand it doesn't matter how big your audience is, and as an athlete either, whether you have a macro engagement or if you have a micro engagement as well. I think the great thing about having a smaller audience could be that you've got more time, and you potentially you can get to know your audiences a lot more better, and you can really individualize how you interact with them, such as having regular Instagram lives about a certain topic that your audience seems to really like. So that's a really good way, and almost relaying back to my point about personalization as well, such as seeing the growth of platforms like Cameo, getting those individualized messages, and understanding what other interests your audience have as well, and then aligning yourself to those types of interests. For example, Anthony Joshua obviously has an exclusive deal, or he does a lot of brand activations with JD Sports, and ultimately he's just casually chilling with people like Heady One, like UK rappers, personalities like Chunks, people that ultimately fit in within urban culture. So I think having that initiative to think, I can tap into different audiences here just by being passionate about what I love. And again, whether that's music, whether that's gaming, whether that's entertainment, it's all, you've got so many different avenues to go down within Generation Z. And it doesn't matter what your level of audience size is. There's always something you can do. You don't have to have millions of followers. Like I said earlier, you can have a micro engaged audience, and it gives you a chance to individualize that personality. So again, and I really hope the athletes really see a lot of value from this. Just take it on board and take action.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a great point you made as well. I'm going to touch upon it, and then we'll round things off. technology really gives you the ability to scale this engagement amongst your entire fan base. And if you have a smaller fan base, I think it's going to be very easy to actually, click into the people who follow you or who are commenting and look who they are, really get to know their personalities and build these sort of personas of your potential audience, because that's likely going to be, as you get bigger and a bigger audience, that's going to be very representative of the people who you attract. And you can use this opportunity of when you have this kind of small audience to really get to know these individuals and understand who your perhaps target consumer is or typical audience member is, and also build relationships with those people. There's actually interesting ways I think you can build loyalty schemes as a fighter or as an athlete with a small audience. Take notice of, if you have 100 people comment, but there's one person who you always know comments every single time, why not send them a free t-shirt or send them a free pair of gloves or a free pair of boots or whatever? And you can even use Twitter lists, for example, as a very easy, cheap, convenient way of just building a list of, here's people who engage with me, I'm going to put you in this list, I'm going to follow you back. You could even, some athletes even sell the ability to follow. You can pay an athlete to follow you, which is kind of insane. And that speaks volumes about what we were saying about what these athletes mean to these younger consumers, this digital sort of centric consumer, where a follow back means so much to them, and they'll screenshot it forever, they'll have it on their phone forever. That's their little piece of interaction, their memory that they have with you as an athlete. If they can't travel all the way to America to watch your fight, hey, at least you follow them, at least you replied to their comment that one time. It's finding those ways to engage them outside of the sport. And it's like I said, that word I always use, it's authentic. You're being yourself, truly giving back. And like Anthony Joshua did, it's authentic in his collaborations. He's engaging with that audience who those rappers and whoever will share with him. He wants to reach those people. It's an authentic collaboration. You're finding the right people. And I'm sure that he's fully aware that he has that audience because of the people who surrounded him, for the people who followed him for the last 10 years before he was even famous or popular, really. So yeah, there's actually, I want to say what I have planned, but I actually can't because it's all confidential stuff. But there's going to be huge innovation in this space. I'm really optimistic about how we can reach Gen Z and engage with them in new ways and really change how athletes engage with this generation and how they adapt and innovate within this kind of more digital centered world of sport. So yeah, there will be lots more on that when I can talk about it. Hopefully within 3 or 4 months, I'll be able to make some announcements of what I'm doing with some of my fighters on that front. But that's all I'll say for now. I'll keep everyone curious and pique their interest. So yeah, without anything more to say for myself, thank you very much for coming on. If you want to make any more comments or plug any of your socials, websites, I'm sure you want to do that. Go ahead.
Perfect stuff. Yeah, listen, if you want to keep up to date with any sports business content, particularly around sport and entertainment merging to create a new culture and how you can really optimize the work that you do, follow Ashwyn Sports Talk on Instagram, ASHS Sports Talk, simple as. I'm also on Twitter. You can find my page on LinkedIn, and I also have a website called www.ashsportstalk.org, where I don't only share my insights around the industry itself, but I also have exclusive interviews with sports business professionals about their careers, insights around the industry. So this is all free content for you guys, invaluable stuff. And George, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, mate. The pleasure's all mine. Once again, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. If you want me to reciprocate as well, appear in any of your content, want to chat to me, I'm more than happy to, mate. So thank you very much. I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode.
Excellent.